What if I told you that a lot of Mexico's problems don't even come from inside their own country? Simply put, they come from the United States. For decades, US leaders have built rules and deals that would keep Mexico down. This isn't by accident. These are choices made in Washington that reach across the border and hit millions of people every single day. So today, that's the reason why I'm exposing 8 laws that were created by the US to weaken Mexico, its economy, and its people. Now, number one is mass deportation. Politicians in the US brag about sending people back home. They act like it's simple. Grab people, toss them in prisons or across the border, and problem is solved. It sounds super tough, right? What really happens is that families get ripped apart. Kids end up without moms or dads. People who have lived in the USA for decades are locked up in these camps or dropped in these towns that they don't even know, with no money, no home, and no work. Deportations also cut off the money migrants send back to Mexico. That money feeds millions of families every year. Without it, whole towns and communities, they fall deeper into poverty. Mexican border cities overflow with people who are forced to return, ones that can't find jobs or housing. Some of them are lucky to find housing and even jobs, but many can't find them. Instead of fixing this problem, deportations create chaos on both sides of the border, even if you're willing to realize it or not. Number two is high tariffs. US leaders claim tariffs that they protect American jobs. They slap heavy taxes on Mexican goods like tomatoes, cars, and steel. It sounds like they're standing up for the workers in America, right? But what really happens is those taxes crush Mexican farms and factories. When the US blocks exports, demand crashes. Factories slow down, farmers dump crops, and workers lose their paychecks. Families in Mexico depend on those jobs to survive. A single tariff can wipe out thousands of workers. It can wipe out their income completely. And when factories close in some of these towns, these really small towns in Mexico, the towns lose life pretty much, which means no pay, no food, and no fees for school, no money for school. And then on the other hand, even US shoppers, people in the US, feel the pain at the stores because their prices rise very noticeably. Basically, the policy burns both sides, it burns both ends. But what it gets sold as is protection. But the only thing they're protecting is people at the top that make all the profits, not normal people, not people with jobs, not everyday Americans or Mexicans, but the ultra wealthy. Number three, guns crossing the border. US officials say cartels get their own weapons. They act like violence south of the border is only because of Mexico and Mexico alone. But the truth, most guns in Mexico came from the United States. That's a fact. Weak background checks at stores, gun shows, that means that rifles, pistols, and even military grade weapons slip easily over the border. And that's just one way that they get into the black market. Once inside Mexico, those guns fuel all sorts of problems. And what happens is that families in Mexico pay the price. Every bullet fired means more chaos and more blood, and especially more empty chairs at dinner tables. Now, I just want to take a minute from your time here from this video. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just recently created a WhatsApp group. The link is in the description. What I wanted to say quickly is that I didn't make it to sell you anything there either. I made it because it's easier to communicate with me there if you're interested in that, because there's quite a few people that want to have conversations, and it's also a place where I'll always have that group no matter what happens to me. I do sometimes talk about a little bit of sensitive information on this channel, and if I do disappear here, at least I'll have that group. You can join it, you don't have to. I appreciate it. I appreciate everything. I appreciate you coming this far in this video, and let's get back to it. The US talks all this talk about fighting drugs, yet it ships the firepower that keeps the territory wars alive in Mexico. So how does that make any sense? So what happens really is that Mexico bleeds. Well, the US is making money selling ammo. Sounds a little twisted to me. The trigger might be pulled in Mexico, but the barrel on the gun usually says made in the USA. Number four, blocking asylum and legal entry. US leaders love to say they keep America safe by shutting the door on asylum entries and legal entries. They make it sound like there's complete control and order. What really happens while the US media spreads the lie that the borders are wide open, families from many countries they believe it and they make the trek from different South American countries and countries all over the world to come and find safety in the US. And they also search for homes and jobs, the American dream. They don't really know if the American dream exists anymore, but that's what they search for. Families get stuck in the border camps with no way forward. Many are left stranded in Mexico with no protection and no promise of a future. And a lot of times, what happens is that gangs, kidnappers, and traffickers target them, taking whatever they can from them, whatever's left, whatever they have, whatever little amount of things they have. Some wait in these camps for months or even years to be denied a fair hearing from the USA. And the US claims that these rules stop crime, but they do the opposite. They create it. They expose mothers, fathers, and children to brutal violence. What happens is Mexico carries this weight. Border towns are overflowing with desperate people who can't move. They can't go anywhere else. They can't work and they can't live safely. The laws on either side of the border, they don't protect these people. What it does is it locks them up in this live cage of fear. So basically the border is not closed or open at all. What it really is it's a trap that catches people with no chances and keeps them stuck in a cycle of abuse. Number 5, cutting off survival money. Some politicians shout about cutting money wires in the US. Let's cut money wires to punish immigrants. They act like blocking this money that's sent back to Mexico is some sort of tough love. The truth, the money is a lifeline. Millions of Mexicans' families survive on the dollars their loved ones send back from working in the USA. That money pays for food, medicine, schools, rent, and so much more. When the US decides to add high banking fees or threaten to stop the transfers, kids go hungry, literally. Even some small towns in Mexico, they collapse without that cash flow. Some people are really they're affected without this flow of cash to them and their families. For many families, this is the only way that they get their income, the only way they survive. And cutting off this flow of money is like cutting off a flow of water in the village or the town. People don't just adjust, they suffer and starve. The US claims that it's good policy, but in reality, it's punishment for the poor. Once again, number 6 is a broken work visa system. The US says we let Mexicans work here legally, and they point to visas like the H-2A for farm jobs as proof. Sounds fair, right? I mean, on paper, it sounds fair. But here's the ugly truth to this. Legal visas are rare. Most workers who apply for them, they get denied. And for the ones that actually get accepted, they get tied to one boss and one boss only. If the boss cheats them, underpays them, or forces them to do dangerous work they don't want to do, they can't just walk away. They'll lose the job, they'll lose the visa, and they'll have to go home without any more money. In a lot of cases, many workers face wage theft, unsafe housing, and no healthcare whatsoever. What happens is that US farms and factories get cheap labor, and Mexican workers get broken promises most of the time. Without fair visas, some Mexicans risk crossing the border without papers. And they chase a job and a dream to try to survive any way they can. Number 7, forced returns. Some say that the old US programs don't matter anymore. What happened was in the past. It's history, they tell you. And then they shrug their shoulders like, it doesn't matter. They act like the past is old news. The thing is, though, is that the scars are still fresh. In the 1930s, the US forced over 1 million Mexicans out of the US. Many were legal residents at the time. Like they were allowed to stay there legally. Families were dragged from their homes, jobs, and schools. Sound like what's going on today is we're kind of repeating the past here. In 1954, Operation Wetback kicked out hundreds of thousands in this military-style sweep across the country. People were just dumped in these border towns and desert towns that they have never ever been to in their lives. They have no connection there. And then there was also the Barquero program, which brought workers in, but trapped them in this in these contracts full of abuse with employers. These actions broke trust, tore families apart, and left whole generations in poverty. The shadow of that for like the forced returns back then, it still shapes the fear today. It shapes migration and inequality in the USA. And like I said, these things are still happening today, but it's happening on a bigger scale with a much bigger budget. It's scary. Number 8, blocking health and education access. US leaders, they'll often say, we can't waste money on immigrants. They use that line to cut healthcare and education for Mexicans and other families living in the USA. The truth is simple. Kids born in Mexico often get denied public benefits like coverage for school and healthcare. Some parents are even scared to enroll their children into school because they worry about deportation. Even US born kids with Mexican parents suffer when families avoid hospitals or schools to stay invisible. And without this care, sickness spreads. Without learning, kids lose futures. Cutting access doesn't save money. It makes communities weaker and poorer. And these are the communities that they're attacking right now. By they, you know who I'm talking about. And then Mexico also feels this pain when sick or uneducated families are forced back across the border with nothing. So the cycle cuts deep, but people don't really think about the consequences. They don't care. It doesn't affect them, but it should affect them. They should care. They should know what's going on. Now you've seen how deep the damage runs, but if you think this is the end of the story, it just ends here, you're wrong. Because there's more to this puzzle nobody talks about. A quiet, powerful strategy aimed straight at Mexicans. And that's why I created this video right here. It's called The Truth Behind the US Government Targeting Mexicans. In that, I go in a little bit more depth of what's really going on. I think it's a good one. And if you made it this far, I think you might think it's a good one too. So click on it, check it out, watch it, and I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.